More recently, I just talked about the history of TV channels and such. And however, I did venture into the game histories, and that being Need for Speed, even Mario Kart, even Nickelodeon kart racers. But in this video, we're gonna be talking about a track racer, and this track racer was Grid, or Race Driver Grid. Before you guys ask me, what's Grid or Race Driver Grid, Tajmir? Well, well, let's talk about this type of grid series that I'm going to tell you guys about. Grid, also known as Race Driver Grid, it is a racing game series developed and published by Codemasters, and by extent later by Electronic Arts, or EA. Race Driver Grid was made as a successor to the Toka Race Driver series. The Toka Race Driver series is a racing game series which is developed by Codemasters. The Grid series used Codemasters' Ego engine, which is shown to be one of the best engines Gamer Alex has ever seen in racing games. Especially for today, the Ego engine has been proven to be the best engine made for Codemasters. Especially now how graphics look very realistic, Codemasters really knows what they're doing. Before we talk about how Race Driver Grid is today, we need to go all the way back to the 90s. Codemasters started the Toka Race Driver series back in 1997, called Toka Touring Car Championship. Released for Windows and PlayStation platforms in late 1997, in Europe in the summer of 1998, in the US as Toka Championship Racing. It features all licensed cars, not including privateers, in tracks from the 1997 British Touring Car Championship. The game was acclaimed by the European game press, especially on consoles, where it was widely considered the best game in its genre, until the release of Gran Turismo several months later. Codemasters went on to creating numerous sequels like Toka 2 Touring Cars, World Touring Cars, Race Driver 2002, Race Driver 2 2004, Race Driver 3 2006, and finally, the Race Driver Create and Race in 2007. Race Driver Create and Race would be developed separately by a small Scottish developer. 2007, Codemasters started a relationship with Firebrand Games and created Race Driver Create and Race. The Toka Race Driver Create and Race was developed separately by Firebrand, and it was released only exclusively for the Nintendo DS. This is basically the Toka Race Driver series for on-the-go entertainment for racing purists who loves racing. After Firebrand Games developed Cartoon Network Racing in 2006, which launched alongside the PS2 version, which was created by Yi Technics, Codemasters negotiated with Firebrand Games to create Toka Race Driver Create and Race in 2007. And it was a great hit among the DS owners. It was actually a great game when I tried it out on emulation, but never on original hardware. Yeah, I did not. Yeah, I was very unknown and was not into big racing games back in the day. Though I did start it to when I started being addicted to Hot Wheels Beat That for the PS2 in 2007. or somewhere in the 2010s. I can never remember. The engine Firebrand Games used, 3D Octane, was modified enough to support a track editor, and Firebrand Games would go on to reuse it for the DS adaptation of the new game, which Codemasters had tasked Firebrand to do. And here we are. We get to the introduction of Grid, also known as Race Driver Grid or Grid 1. I'm going to refer to the Grid series as Race Driver Grid as Grid 1, Race Driver Grid as Race Driver Grid's sequel as Race Driver Grid 2, Race Driver Grid Autosport, Race Driver Grid 2019, and Race Driver Grid Legends. Let's start off with Grid 1. Developed under the working title Race Driver 1, Race Driver Grid was released in 2008 for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, the Nintendo DS, and games for Windows in June 2008. Before its release, over 1 million people downloaded the demo version. It features an improved graphics engine. A common complaint was that even on the lowest settings, the graphics couldn't be handled by low-spec PCs. From Colin McRae Dirt 1 has over 40 real-life cars and a variety of both fictional and realistic interpretations of tracks. Race Driver Grid 1 was actually been praised. People love the grippy handling, unique sponsors, the great overall atmosphere, the car's damage model, and just everything else that what Race Driver Grid 1 has to offer. For many, it was the arcade-style track racer that everyone always wanted. Codemasters successfully reinvented their Toka Race Driver series. And all they had to do is to keep that momentum very great and bright and popular. However, by the time when Race Driver Grid made its way into the picture, their follow-ups did not go well. There was a lot of anticipation for Race Driver Grid 2, which was released in May 2013. It's been like 5 years since the first game's release. Much improvements were changed. Improved physics, improved graphics, increased sense of speed, and much more new content, while keeping the motorsport aesthetic, style, and focus alongside with one of the unique physics from the first game. Yeah, much of the physics and such from the first game would be carried over. While the game doesn't have a first-person interior camera and got rid of the team management system, which was also in the first game, the handling model would become one of its talking points, according to Gamer Alex. The game introduced us the True Feel Brake to Drift handling model. Like what you see in Hot Wheels Unleashed today. Especially with the arcade style drifting, like what you see in the Mario Kart series and other kart racers, including Need for Speed Nitro. This feels pretty weird though. With this would gradually phase away the grippy handling from the first game. Despite getting general favorable reviews, the game became extremely controversial. While a lot of people were upset about the handling model changes, while some loved the new drifting model. When I looked up Grid 2's brake to drift handling model, the reasons for why were obvious. The True Feel handling model was designed to provide players with a direct connection to the car's behavior, allowing them to understand how each car reacts in different situations. and adapt their driving accordingly. This approach aimed to capture the true personality of each vehicle, reflecting the way it drives, shifts its weight, and handles traction loss. While still being accessible to a broader audience, the handling model in Grid 2 was meant to be challenging and rewarding, requiring precise throttle control and manual counter steering during drifts, which adds a layer of skill to the gameplay. The True Field brake to drift handling model in Grid 2 was intended to be more realistic and less forgiving compared to other racing games, making drifting feel more natural and requiring players to have a good sense of car control. The model was praised for its ability to reward skilled players and punish those who make mistakes, creating a skill gap that adds depth to the multiplayer experience. However, unfortunately, not all people don't really like this type of model as it kind of feels pretty pathetic. Y'all could say something negative all you want. It makes you feel like you're a hero when you do this brake to drift handling model, though. But it really doesn't even matter. Again, that was 2013. With this made Race Driver Grid 2 one of the more divisive entries in the series. However, this wouldn't be old. However, this is another controversy thing. The licensed cars can no longer have amazing damage for their during races. The unique damage model from Grid 1 was phased away. Why was this done? Well, I just found out and been told that Codemasters couldn't get away with that level of deformation anymore, as it sounds like the car companies began to feel a little strict. Yeah, in order to make a racing game, either if you're at Electronic Arts or somewhere else, or somewhere at another game developer company or publisher, the problem mainly comes down to vehicle licensing. Car companies these days now are very strict on the damage they don't like being shown on their vehicles. So having extreme levels of deformation nowadays is out of the question. This is one of the more complexity things, which is kind of too complex for me to know because I'm not really big on damage models. I'm not a huge fan of having licensed vehicles having bad damage models. Unless if they're fictional vehicles. Yes, it's true. I'm a fan of unlicensed vehicles having unique damage models. The licensed cars having damage models, I'm sorry, count me out because after what I just seen in various videos with having vehicles that has bad damage models, sadly count me out because I am not because I don't want to see something like that especially a city trolley, especially on a city trolley that has bad damage models. While Grid 2 was doing well, while the sequel was doing very well, Codemasters was not happy at the negative feedback they were receiving. They decided to return to the series' roots by heavily focusing on motorsports. And this follow-up a year later attempts to move the series back to more authentic racing games, following the release of Grid 2, which Codemasters felt was not as well received by the company's core fanbase as they hoped. So they decided to make a rework Grid 2. Yet this would begin to alienate fans even more. And here is Race Driver Grid 3, or Grid Autosport. Grid Autosport is essentially a reworked Grid 2 that was only released a year after Grid 2's release. The handling model was tweaked to remove the brake to drift handling model aspect and made the handling model much more grippy. That's an actual good step in the right direction to some people. However, the lackluster brake power was not increased from Grid 2, leading to much slower cornering speeds. Also, more on hand, the game focuses more on team play, having the option to dictate your teammate on track. The first-person interior camera was added, and racing disciplines, which were removed in Grid 2, was added back in Grid Autosport. Aesthetically, the game became much more professional with its soundtrack and UI design. Overall, the game went from arcade-style track racer to a much more serious simcade experience, leading to a mixed player reception. Despite getting generally positive reviews on Metacritic, this is not enough. The general reception from the players is really mixed. It's a real shame, though. However, some people said that they were happy. That the game is much less arcadey than Grid 2, but others still think that the game swung way too heavily in the simulation direction. Oh yeah, this is not a good way. This is not a good direction. Technology-wise, Codemasters collaborated with Intel on certain technology within the game, including high-end visual optimizations, DirectX 11 support, touchscreen input, tablet gaming support with WeD, Intel's wireless second screen technology. Details were disclosed during a 2014 interview with Toby Evan Jones, producer, and senior graphics programmer Richard Kettlewell. Overall, there were updates and downloadable content in Grid Autosport. A few years later, Grid Autosport made its way to mobile and Nintendo Switch. The iOS version received a 90 out of 100, while the Switch version received a 79 out of 100. Also, since the game was released since the game came out after the release of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, having an older game on older gen consoles meant it ended up getting overlooked. Despite Grid Autosport seeing moderate success on mobile and the Nintendo Switch 1, it's very clear that whatever Codemasters is doing, they had to reinvigorate the series. So they decided to make another new follow-up to Grid Autosport. Yet the follow-up would become its worst release. And this would be 5 years later. The series ended up getting a reboot. The series was rebooted with the release of Grid 2019. So this would be the worst entry in the series. Grid 2019 emphasizes the concept of racing disciplines, making them into new event categories. Not just that, there are also new improvements made, such as a new physics model, Nemesis system for AI, an updated graphics engine, and more. However, this would have been the slam dunk success the franchise needed, and this should have been a triumphant reboot of a declining franchise. In Gamer Alex's case, he did say that the game was marketed well and was getting favorable reviews from critics. Unfortunately, Gamer Alex is actually wrong. The reception for Grid 2019 was received mixed or average reviews and generally favorable reviews. It did receive awards, It was nominated and it won an award at Gamescom. It even was nominated at the Titanium Awards. But what is even the problem with Grid 2019? Well, despite being marketed well and getting favorable reviews from critics, it was bombed with players all over. Many people complained about the slow sense of speed, slidey, slippery handling. Alongside that, Codemasters removed the sponsors, and also the damage model was downgraded. Well, that's because of the car companies. Car companies are very strict on the damage they don't want being shown on their vehicles. So having extreme levels of deformation is out of the question. One example, the big reason why Driver San Francisco has a few unlicensed cars is so that the developers can blow them up. And like what Gamer Alex said, it's clear that Codemasters couldn't get away with that level of deformation anymore, as it seems that the car companies became even more strict. And this is one of the more dang reasons why racing games are not the same, because much of the licensed vehicles now get little damage. Another main problem looms on the horizon is why the vehicular combat genre is dead. Because nobody does not want to make fictional unlicensed ships. I mean, again, if teams were only stuck with using real world vehicles, according to Gamer Alex, and according to one of my one of my previous videos about why is everybody disliking the creativity in fictional TV videos, we wouldn't gotten games like Burnout, Grip, Wipeout, or Full Auto, nor Gas Guzzlers, or Trail Out, or Flat Out. Catching on, I hope. So with Grid 2019 being the worst entry in the series, it said that the developers were still trying too hard to appeal to the sim racing fans while forgetting the fundamental aspects of what made Race Driver Grid. 2019 was considered the worst entry in the series, which is a real shame though. While I like the graphics and such, but it leaves a lot to be desired. It leaves a lot to be desired. And Grid 2019 would be one of the frustrating blunders out of Codemasters. Next to one of the mixed receptions on Dirt 5, which was worked on the studio who made MotorStorm and Drive Club. This being Evolution Studios, or formerly, which was later been rebranded as Codemasters Evo, short for Revolution, Evolution Studios, or nowadays we now call it Codemasters Cheshire, which later folded and merged into Criterion Games. Yeah, catch my drift? Catch the drift though. Seriously, look up Codemasters Cheshire and guess what happens? It relocates you right into Criterion, proving that the team now works for Criterion, who also in turn worked with part of the Need for Speed series. With the lowest point of the series reach, Codemasters made one last effort to listen to fans and fix their mistakes. While Grid 2019 was an improvement, which was the sequel, it would ultimately seal the fate of the series. Following Codemasters' acquisition, now being under EA, this would begin to see the end of an era for Codemasters. And we get to the introduction of Race Driver Grid Legends. Race Driver Grid Legends is essentially a big update for Grid 2019, containing more than 130 tracks to race on, ranging from real-life circuits to fictional ones, more than 100 vehicles, including touring cars, tractor unit trucks, open wheel cars, stadium trucks, drift cars, even electric vehicles, to compete in arena ovals, on street circuits, or off road tracks. For the first time in the series, the players have the ability to create their own races, including custom routes, obstacles, vehicle restrictions, and rules. Inspired by Netflix's documentary series Formula One Drive to Survive, the game includes a story focused career mode for the first time in the series, entitled Driven to Glory. Codemasters had previously opted to include a plot focused career mode in F1 2021 with Breaking Point. In Grid Legends, however, the mode is much more narrative focused, with the story in particular focusing on an unnamed race driver referred to as Driver 22, named after the driver's race number, and the fact that the game supports up to 22 players. A number of professional actors have been hired to portray different characters in the game, now utilizing the same virtual set technology used in the American space western television series The Mandalorian to insert the actors into virtual backgrounds. The cast includes actor Nokurichi Getawa, who portrays Valentin Manzrai, number one driver for Volts Racing. The game also marks the first physical appearance of Nathan McCain, who has been a staple character throughout the Grid series, portrayed by Callum McGuan, and reprising his role for number one driver for Raven Rest Motorsport. He did one of the major characters actually previously appeared in the Toka Race Driver games. One of them, actually. Other characters, which were portrayed by other people, made their way in. Grid Legends was announced at EA Play Live 2021, and it will be the fifth, and possibly the last entry in the Grid series. Developed by Codemasters, and the first installment being published by EA, making the series debuted on EA's Origin as their main platform, which is also playable on the EA desktop app. In addition, being released on Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One platforms, it also made their way into the 9th gen consoles, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series consoles. DLC content-wise, the first major post-release downloadable content pack, Classic Carnage, was released in 2022. It features the returning Demolition Derby race type from Grid Autosport, alongside with the series presentation cutscenes 4 courses and 5 cars specifically made for Demo Derby. This is basically the unlicensed vehicles which can be damaged. However, even though Grid Legends received general favorable reviews for Windows and PlayStation 5 and mixed average reviews from Xbox Series consoles, and it was received much better by both fans and critics, it ended up selling poorly. Due to a lack of marketing, which either Codemasters and EA had dropped the ball on, releasing the game on the same day as Elden Ring, and releasing a week before the highly anticipated Gran Turismo 7, the game fell under the radar for many players, even for fans of the series. Some include also as an additional factor from Gamer Alex. Some people today still steer clear of the game due to the issues, including the physics, damage, and AI not being fully reworked from Grid 2019. Honestly, Codemasters begin to listen to fans though, and this is actually a good step in the right direction. However, they did drop the ball on marketing, and that's a huge letdown. You got to have better marketing. honestly, Codemasters did drop the ball on marketing on one of the previous games that was developed by 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 the Drive Club and the MotorStorm series developers. This being Onrush. The publisher believes that the game would just sell itself. That's not going to work out. And surely enough, it did not. Seriously, it just did not. It's a real shame that Grid Legends should have gotten much more marketing than what EA and Codemasters had to do. Technology wise, the game runs on Codemasters' Ego engine, version 4.0. Oh, not bad, not bad. This is actually Codemasters' updated graphics engine that they were currently using. In the end, while Grid was one of the more divisive entries, though, it was one of the few arcade track racers that trudged on, despite its rocky existence and its controversial flaws and factors that Gamer Alex had just listed. It proved to be a great arcade track racer next to Ridge Racer and Project Gotham Racing, which I'll definitely cover Project Gotham Racing in a future video. What caused Grid to go down and what caused it to go dark? Well, the downfall has to be one of the changes and things going on at Codemasters. What was that? Well, the brake to drift handling model, the braking power not being increased from Grid 2. Grid Autosport became a much more serious sim arcade experience. Grid 2019 having a repetitive career, slippery handling, and other issues alongside with no sponsors and more. And this is very sad. Sadly, nobody won't be able to play Grid 2019 and buy it from digital stores, as Grid 2019 was silently dropped from digital storefronts. What do you think? Grid was quietly delisted from digital storefronts in November 2023, and that was 2 years ago. Oh wow, that was a huge letdown. That's the problem. One common issue about using real cars is contracts. Many racing games have been and will be delisted due to expiring vehicle licenses, usually after 5 or so years. Thankfully, games with fictional vehicles aren't affected. This is why Flat Out 2 and Burnout Revenge are still here to this day. The only licensing they have to worry about is music. As for Grid today, Grid Legends, out of all games, alongside with other Grid titles, are still being sold on websites like Amazon or eBay. Grid 2019, on the other hand, I think it can be bought on Amazon or eBay. I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure though. I did find Grid 1 and Grid 2 on Amazon though. It's a shame that Codemasters is now under EA. Because having Codemasters being owned under Electronic Arts is a huge mistake. Because Electronic Arts had been fumbling recently though. After what they did with their with the developers, like rushing games to be developed and such, and getting them released with not having enough content and such, this will ultimately be proven to be a big mistake. and as of right now with Grid Legends, thankfully though, Grid Legends is still here on digital storefronts though, and they seem to be going on sale for oh, honestly though, honestly they're honestly, I still see Grid Legends still trudging on, but it might be a possibility that it might go away because of the expiring vehicle licenses. In the end, while Grid is a divisive series, from the controversies, the brake to drift handling model, and such, the Grid series is still one of the few arcade track racers that trudged on despite its rocky existence after Project Gotham Racing has seen its end, when Bizarre Creations went on to make Blur, which is a successor to Project Gotham Racing, which it failed commercially, which ultimately ended up Activision to shut down Bizarre Creations afterwards. And Need for Speed Shift, despite I'm not really into more of a sim arcade experience, which I'm starting to feel a little edgy of. It's still at least it's a nice little arcade track racer, but it's not really perfect. Am I playing it? Of course not. Because I'm into arcade racing. Having a non-arcade racing can really untreasure my experience. This video is only for the veterans who remembers the Grid series. So don't expect for me to know that this is for everyone. This video is strictly on the purist who actually likes the Grid series as such. 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 Now, I forgot one thing. The Race Driver Grid 1 series on the Nintendo DS. While it reuses much of the aspects and vehicles, part of the vehicles from the main game, it would not be developed by Codemasters, being handled instead by Firebrand Games. Firebrand Games went on to become the best developer to create the DS conversion of Race Driver Grid. They also went on to create Colin McRae's Dirt 2. And Grid on the DS is very great. Grid DS was proven to be the best racing game among the critics, and it even has much of the content that's a lot like its big brother, and that being the main consoles and PC version, just with a similar PlayStation 1 like engine, and what it was running on, Firebrand Games' 3D Octane engine, which is shown to be one of the best engines I've ever seen Firebrand has used. I mean, the Octane engine has actually been usable very well. However, I wish I would have access to the 3D Octane engine as well, because I am desired to create a fan game for everyone. There isn't much to say that this is a basic handheld spin-off of Race Driver Grid for the handheld market. Having racing purists who owns a DS to have their experience of Race Driver Grid on the go. Oh. Basically, that's just what it's all about. So that's just about it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments to racing purists who loved Race Driver Grid. Which installment of Race Driver Grid were you into back in the day? Thank you guys all for watching, and until next time, stay tuned.